All right, so let's see. All right, is it recording? I think we're live. All right. So, hey everybody, I wanted to welcome you to another exciting episode of Health and Wealth Junkie podcast. I think this is episode number 4, where we talk about everything from health, wealth, and everything in between. I'm your host, Sherry Dugnan, and today I am truly inspired to have a guest join us, Matt Roar Gardner, as he's got his title there. We'll find out more about that. Matt is I guess you could say former or previous fighter pilot in the military, and we'll touch on that for a little bit. Also a cancer survivor, and he has now turned to all things real estate as a real estate, I'll say, guru. And so he's had an incredible journey. I want to kind of touch on all aspects of that with him today. So without further ado, Matt, thank you so much for coming on today. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Super happy to be on, Sherry. So thanks for inviting me.
Of course. So let's touch on, because I do know a lot of your backstory of a fighter pilot in the military, and I think it's a pretty fascinating story. So talk a little bit about your experience there and what kind of transitioned you out of the military, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. Definitely. I had the pleasure of, serving in the military, but specifically, flying fighter jets in the military. No, no problem. When people say thank you for your service, I say, thank you for paying your taxes, because I got to go fly fighter jets, so it was great. And I got paid to do it.
That's true.
Yeah, it was awesome. So 11 years of flying jets. It was awesome. I flew F-15s and F-35s, which is kind of the new stealth fighter jet we have in the military, and was an instructor in there. And it was awesome. It was as amazing as you would think it would be. Every little boy's dream. But as in 2018 is when I got diagnosed with cancer, which basically is what was my catalyst out of the military. There was hope during the cancer diagnosis and treatment that we'd be able to stay in and continue flying. But in the end, there was some lung damage, basically what it was. So lung damage from the chemotherapy and from the tumors themselves, basically, that had resulted in me not being able to stay in the military.
Okay. Well, that's too bad, but I'm sure that comes out with a good story in the end, right?
Yeah. It's the classic story. I think, what is it? There's the Buddhist story that talks about a man who has a son, and the son's plowing the field, and the son breaks his leg, and everyone in the town's like, "Oh no, your son broke his leg. That's so bad." And he's like, We'll see. And then the next day, the military comes to conscript all the boys, but he's not conscripted, and because he has a broken leg. And then everyone in the town's like, "Oh, it's so great. Your son didn't make it in the military." He's like, We'll see. And it kind of continues the whole back and forth of everything that people perceive as bad is actually good, and everything that people perceive as good is actually bad. So, yeah.
That is a great way to look at it. And that's very true. I think there's always a silver lining in everything that happens.
Oh, for sure.
Right. And so, no, that's awesome. So, so tell us a little bit. I mean, obviously, cancer is a big thing. And a lot of people don't like to talk about the C word, right? Tell us a little bit about your experience with that and kind of obviously where you are today.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, my initial kind of recognition that something was wrong. I was out flying in Las Vegas, and all of a sudden I walked up the hotel room stairs. I was taking up, going to the second floor, and I was out of breath after walking up just one flight of stairs. And I was like, that's really weird. I was like 32 at the time and young and healthy, and it was just really odd. And I had just been extra tired over the previous week, tired to the point where at work I would close the door and take a nap, which was not normal for me.
Yeah.
I have 4 young kids. So I just said, my kids are making me tired. It just happens. But multiple things kind of added up to it. Was just feeling weird. And then my lymph node was swollen up as well. And when it didn't feel sick, sometimes they'll kind of swell up when you're sick. Right. And so all those factors just were enough that I knew something was just weird. And so I went to my flight doc, and she said, well, let's just get you a scan of your chest to see what's going on. And they did a scan of the chest, and they had a bunch of tumors. Basically, I had 9 tumors in my chest, and one of them was called a bulky tumor. One was the size of a softball between my heart and my spine, basically. And
gosh.
Yeah, huge. And it was just surprising to know that much growth could be inside of you without even knowing it. And so from there started kind of the journey of figuring out what it is. Can we treat it? And how are we going to treat it? It ended up being Hodgkin lymphoma, and it was it's a blood cancer, so you can't necessarily just cut it out. And so that's why we elected to start chemotherapy. We did just under 5 months of chemotherapy, did the whole sick act, lose all the hair, the whole thing. It was
Wow.
it is what it is. And then in the end, hopefully, like I was saying, I was hopeful that I was going to be able to fly again after we had been in remission. But the Air Force decided to effectively give me the boot, and they said, "Thank you for your service and good luck."
Wow. That's too bad. But it's. I'm glad you're still here and you're in remission, right? At this point,
yeah, good to go. Healthy and feeling great.
And recovered through. I mean, chemo, I know is very tough on the body and very hard to come through and all that. And so, like I said, I think it's the military's loss, right? And I think you've come out pretty well on the other side. So
it was a good wake up call, right?
Right.
Yeah. It's a good wake up call where when you have something like that happen, you definitely reevaluate, because the type of cancer that I had, there's no known cause, right? So you just then go to every little rabbit hole you can. Like, was I eating too much sugar? Was I, was it the processed foods? Was it, what can I do to not have this happen in the future now that I'm in remission? And it stinks when you don't have a smoking gun to point to, but you just do what you can to then just try to have an all-encompassing, healthier lifestyle than you had before.
Right. So there's no, like you said, known cause, right? So you're like, it's not like smoking and you can go, okay, you had lung cancer because you smoked, and now if you don't smoke, you're going to be okay. Wow. Okay. So that's tough. But all you can do is live as healthy as you can at this point, right? So, So, and how long have you been in remission now at this point?
Just hit the 5-year mark. Actually, my wife was like, "Hey, we need 5 years, a big mark for remission with this type of cancer." So they say, my wife's like, "You need to get your final checkup to make sure you're good." So we recently moved to Tampa, and I don't have like an oncologist down there, so she's pushing me right now to get that final oncologist kind of check marks to say we're good to go.
I was gonna say that 5-year mark is usually that then you're good going forward, right?
Basically that's when they consider you a cancer survivor versus being in remission, basically.
Right. Nice. Well, congratulations. Go sell it. Get the test.
I know, get the test so I can celebrate. Yeah.
So obviously you were left out of the military, not sort of knowing, I guess, what you were going to do at that point, right? Or did you have sort of a plan at that time?
No, when I was in chemo, so basically the military, I would study. We worked a lot, right, as fighter pilots. So I'd study 12 to 14 hours sometimes in top secret vaults where we would just study tactics or different bombs and different missiles and different ways that we could, employ our ordinances and defend America. But when I transitioned to a point where I was in the hospital full time, basically, I then transitioned to one of my buddies gave me the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is like the classic book to enter you into real estate. I then got hooked on to Bigger Pockets, which is another kind of classic way to really kind of get addicted to real estate. And that's what I did. So I went from studying, fighter pilot tactics for 10 to 12 to 14 hours a day to studying real estate tactics, basically, while I was just in the hospital. And I got hooked at that point. And so I didn't have a plan necessarily. The writing was kind of on the wall that the Air Force might kick us out. So I started while I was still in the military. There was a little bit of an overlap where I was like, all right, I'm going to get my real estate license. I'm going to start investing. But soon thereafter, I got an email from the Air Force that said, hey, you have 10 days and you're officially out of the military. And so they gave me a 10-day warning and I was out. So jumped right into it.
Well, here days and you're out, right? So that's a little frustrating, but
yes.
So you're in the hospital, you're studying real estate, obviously you get out. What was your first move? What was your first
investing is definitely what was most exciting to me. So I jumped into a flip first of all. I didn't realize though that I was effectively living that poor dad mentality, and I was living paycheck to paycheck, not even knowing it though. In the military, it was a secure job, so I thought I was good. And I looked at my savings, and I had a wife and 4 kids, and I only had $2,000 in my savings account, and I was like, oh, this is not comfortable, knowing that this is going to stop very soon. And I didn't have a ton of extra income to invest, but I knew I really wanted to. And so that's when I connected with some local wholesalers. They brought me a deal, and I was starting to engage in Bigger Pockets and some other online forums with investors. And I put out a YouTube video. I had like 300 followers, just friends basically. Yeah. And this video got, I think, 20 views. But the video was about how you can invest your IRA into real estate. Because I didn't even know it. And so I was super excited to find this out. And so I just put a YouTube video about it. and somebody reached out to me from that video, said, "Hey, I got $300,000. Let me know if you want to invest." It was a friend of mine I hadn't talked to in like 8 years.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, cool. And then same thing on Bigger Pockets, just from my engaging on Bigger Pockets. Somebody said, "Hey, I got $50,000. I live in Hawaii. That could barely buy me a gallon of milk here. So let me know if you want to invest, where you are." And I said, great. And so I had some people who were interested in investing with me. I just needed to find the deal. So I found that first deal of flipping. I spent $100 to start the business bank account, $150 to start the LLC. They wired in their money. I ran the deal and we made 45 grand in the first deal. I was like, oh, wow, this is great.
Not bad
this
for your
works.
first yeah, you're like, okay, I'm hooked, right?
Yeah, pretty much. It was like, okay, I pushed the I believe button and I was full throttle from there.
Right. Wow. That's awesome. So you started out flipping and got into doing a few deals, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah. So flipping was the start for the investing. At the same time, the sales started. So I was an investor, but also an agent for investors for the most part. Right. So it was a nice kind of what I like to call self-licking ice cream cone. Since I'd bring investors in to find deals, like I'd be constantly looking for deals, whether I would tackle them or my investors would. I'd be able to monetize pretty much any deal, either through the sale or through personally buying it. And so it worked out really well. And I started flipping. Then I transitioned to more short-term rentals. I found flipping was just a little bit too stressful for me. It's just like a big unknown. I don't like managing contractors as much.
Well, it's still another job of deal after deal, right? You still have to. You're only good on that deal, and then you got to find another one, right?
It's not a path to wealth, right? It's a path to being rich, but not necessarily being wealthy. And so I transitioned to short-term rentals, more of the long hold mentality with the short-term rental where we were in Destin, Florida, which was like gaining in popularity significantly at the time. And from there, bought my first mobile home park, bought my first apartment complex, and kind of just grew to where now the portfolio is a pretty good mix of everything. We have, I have a couple RV parks. We have, 7 or 8 different apartment complexes that we've syndicated as general partners. And then I have, short-term rentals and long-term rentals. So I tried to have a little bit of diversity within the real estate space.
No, that's great. Yeah. And I mean, short-term rentals, that's a great space. Obviously it was, you're in the right market, obviously, because you're already in a vacation area. Whereas like mine, we're in suburbs of Atlanta and we're still fighting the fight against the cities and the ordinances.
Zoning ordinances. Yeah. It's a concern for bigger cities for sure. Like I had a good friend who had a bunch in New York before New York basically said you're not allowed to do it. And now, they got put in a pretty bad position where if you're buying in Smokies or in Orlando or in like the Panhandle, Florida, I don't expect regulations that really kind of crush us here. Yeah,
they've already fought those battles, right? They've already, they're already set. No, and that's shoot, what a better place to go have to work, right?
Destin. I love it. Destin's just absolutely gorgeous. One of my tours, we lived in 3 years, for 3 years, we lived in England and we traveled all around Europe, and with the family, and it was awesome. But honestly, none of the beaches in Europe compared to Destin. Destin's just Destin, Panama City Beach, the whole Emerald Coast here, Santa Rosa Beach. It's just, the sand is just beautiful. The water's gorgeous. And it's a busy area, but it's not overly dense either, so it's a nice combination of everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't know how Destin was so hidden for so long, right? Like Santa Rosa, nobody really knows about them. And now they're starting to definitely take off even more, which I think is great for what you're doing. So you transitioned a little bit out of the short-term rentals into multifamily. Tell me a little bit about how you kind of got started with, your syndication deals and GP.
Yeah. I, as you get more and more into the investing space, you see that's kind of in general, the goal that a lot of investors try to achieve is the multifamily world. It seems to be kind of where people try to graduate into. Right. And so I figured, hey, might as well start to focus on it. And there was a local real estate association that I was a part of, and they had a 6-month commercial mastermind that you paid extra money for. It was just 10 of us that met once a month for 6 months, basically. And it worked out really well. It was just a really good group of people. And that small group of networking really is how I started to get into multifamily space. So that's the education was there, but also they connected me with a local attorney who does a lot of the syndication deals, the local insurance agent who understands the multifamily space, or the brokers in the area. So, it was the relationships built there were huge. And one of the guys from the group basically called me one day and said, hey, here's an opportunity. I know with some GPs who are having issues raising money and this could be your door into the GP space if you want to do it. And so I met with the other two partners who had started this deal, and I underwrote it with them. And I said, hey, we might be a good fit. And we sat down. It's not like when you're going to do a joint venture for a flip where you're only married for 9 months, hopefully, or a year. This is a long-term journey, like minimum of 5 years typically is what you can expect. Sometimes 20, 30 years, depending on the hole.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I wanted to make sure we were all on the same page. And I actually wanted to be with these guys long-term. And so we sat down, we had that kind of very frank discussion of, hey guys, right now I'm very busy. I can't be dedicated. I can't be the asset manager who's dealing with the property manager every day. I can't be that guy. I can be a one-off project guy. I can help you raise money. I can, I'm real from the analysis side. I'm very conservative in my nature, so I'm happy to do some number crunching. But, and then the other guy was like, hey man, I'm happy to be boots on the ground. I don't have time. I don't want to be the number cruncher. And the other guy said, hey, I want to be investor relations. So it just worked out really well to where all the strengths and weaknesses kind of, worked together.
And that's the best part about multifamily, right? Is it's, I think a lot of people think you need tons of money to go out and buy a multifamily or apartment complex. And, in reality, a lot of these are owned by people in groups just like you, myself, we come together and everybody brings their strength, and it could be that you're just going to run the deal, right? You're going to work closely with property managers or maybe manage a property yourself. And that might be all you bring to the table, right? Somebody else might bring the deal and that might be all they bring, and other people are raising the capital, things like that. So I think the biggest sort of myth out there is that you need all this money in order to get into multifamily. And there's so many different ways. And it ultimately does come down to sort of who you know and what you know, right?
For sure. I mean, people ask me quite often is, how do I get into multifamily? What's the easiest way? I say, I mean, any sort of investing, the hardest part of the investment is finding the deal, right? So if you're out there, if you're networking and you're finding deals, I guarantee you get your way in. If it's truly a deal, like if you were to bring me a 300 unit apartment complex, that's a killer deal that we can actually add value and, execute our model on, then you will be part of the deal. I mean, that's a massive value part. Without that deal, nothing else is
right.
Exists. You know what I mean?
Yep. So, yeah, it's funny. I have a friend right now. She's working on a really amazing development, but she doesn't really know how to do some of the underwriting piece of it. And so she's looking for that person. And it's like, you're going to give them part of the deal to help put that together. Right. So she's got the deal, but she needs somebody to underwrite it basically. So, no, I think that's awesome. And I love what you're doing. You got, RV. I think there's a huge need for RV parks and mobile homes. I think mobile homes are, and now it's kind of more the tiny home, right, or whatever. But there's
it's interesting for sure. I think mobile homes are one of the few asset classes that are still shrinking. Because most cities are not allowing as many mobile homes parks to be built. That's generally more of an eyesore considered, like when I'm talking amongst the zoning committee at a county.
Sure.
And so it's one of the few asset classes that, from what I've read, that they're shrinking at a rate of around 1% a year. So where apartment complexes are going up everywhere, and so it's
right. And yet there's such a need, because I think a lot of people like the mobile home or more of a tiny home type, their own home, right? It's like, even though it's on wheels, it's like, it's not part of an apartment complex or multifamily. So I think there's still that need, even more so now with affordable, housing, right?
Affordable housing is so big. And I know we were talking before we started how that's one of your goals as well with the whole, senior affordable housing. And I think I think it's so appropriate for where we are right now. Every apartment that's going up right now is a Class A apartment that's like even maximizing rents even more and pushing things up even higher. You don't see, it wouldn't make sense for someone to build a Class C apartment right now. Like it just doesn't really exist. And so, so I'm a big fan of mobile home park for that reason. It just really gives people who can't otherwise have their own place, it gives them an opportunity to live.
And I just think that's what I'm finding is through the flipping that I was doing and working with sellers directly, I found a lot of older women who maybe had lost their husbands, and they're kind of, in their larger homes, and they're like, I can't afford to really downsize into something smaller because the prices of all those homes are more than what mine is now. They lose a little bit of sense of community, but they don't want to live in an apartment. They want their own four walls. They want their, their space and a little bit of maybe a yard or at least a garden or something like that. And so, what I'm trying to kind of create is something that offers that in sort of like a mobile home park, but it would be potentially more I'll say stick built homes,
Sure.
And there's communities where the density, that's where you're fighting again with the ordinances, but you could put, I know one right now that they did a little over half an acre, but they have 8 homes on it. But they're homes that are affordable. They're 500 square feet. And I think one is like 200 and some, which is probably a little too small. But the idea is it's still, people love them. They sold out like immediately because, people want something affordable that's their own, that's not an apartment. So I think there is that need. So anyway, so talk about, I know obviously a lot of people coming out of the military, they struggle with transitioning into, back into I'll say, normal corporate life,
civilian life. Yes.
Civilian life. There you go. Sorry, I couldn't find the right word. Tell me about some of the challenges that you face. Is there anything that you kind of learned from the military that helped you in real estate too, or?
It's interesting. I mean, it's tough to generalize all the military, right? Because certain people in one role in the military are going to have a different kind of outlook or experience than, a different role. So coming from the fighter pilot background where work ethic was at a high, everyone around you was at a type A personality. And if something needed to get done, people were very proactive. And if they said that they were going to do it, they actually did it and typically exceeded the expectations for what you wanted to be done.
Right.
Where I think that the hardest thing for me leaving the military was realizing that's not the case in the civilian world. Most people do not have that kind of pride of work. They don't have the work ethic to try to get things done ahead of time and at a level that exceeds the expectations. And it was very disappointing for me at first. That's why I said dealing with flips, right? You have a contractor say they'll be there at a certain day and they don't show, don't call, and you can't get a hold of them again. They just ghost you, where in the military, things like that just wouldn't happen.
Doesn't happen.
Right. Yeah. So that was a very, I guess that was a big learning point for me to understand that's kind of how it operates in the civilian world. So people just failing to do their job basically is what it was. But takeaways from the military, I would say, is definitely that work ethic piece in general, just having the understanding that sometimes you need to just suck it up and grind for a 10-hour day, a 12-hour day, a 14-hour day, as long as needed to finish whatever task is at a hand, where I think a lot of people just don't have that, haven't been either trained or maybe don't understand how much of a difference it makes to work the extra little bit in a day if needed to make the next day so much better.
Right.
So,
No, you don't really have a choice to get things done in the military. You're not gonna survive very long if you don't, right?
Yeah, you get weeded out. I mean, like I said, in the fighter pilot world, in order to get there, you need to pass pilot training, right? And pilot training alone is already like 30% of people are weeded out and fail pilot training. And then from there, you'll say, it's typically the top 5 to 10% get accepted to even go to fighter school. And then when you go to fighter school, it's another portion are weeded out. And so you got this like cream of the crop of people where it's just really great individuals who are super high speed. And I think it's one of the cool things about certain communities that people are building, because they build these communities within the real estate space of high speed individuals as well. And so once you surround yourself with people who are like go-getters, it makes a difference. It motivates you, and it's nice. So that's always been my goal: find those communities of people who are like the fighter pilots of the real estate world, if you will.
Right. No, exactly. That's awesome. And then also, as a cancer survivor, I mean, that is an incredibly tough. Obviously, just even from the emotional of being diagnosed all the way through the battle through chemo, and I know several of my really close friends that have gone through that same fight. How did that experience maybe change your goals, your perspective, kind of your outlook on life?
Definitely outlook was shifted for sure. It's one of those things you always know life can end pretty quickly. My father died suddenly when I was 13. So that's always been like in the back of my mind of that life is it's fragile, right? It can go at any time, but it definitely slaps you in the face when you have an event like that, where you're just like, oh man, this could have gotten serious. Like this could have ended, this could have ended my life. And so you definitely try to, I think you just appreciate things a little bit more going forward. It's tougher for me to get angry, where before I think it was easier to be angry, where now I'm like, it's whatever. There for certain things, one of the aspects of the cancer that I had, it was basically the tumors were surrounding my heart and they were pushing against my heart. And the heart, there's skin around the heart called the pericardium, right? And so it's like it protects the heart. Between the pericardium and the heart, there's fluid. And so as the heart pumps, if there's some pressure against the heart basically fills that sac between the heart and the pericardium with more fluid. to have it more cushioned, basically. And
Okay.
but my tumors were basically pushing and pushing and pushing on the heart, so the heart kept adding fluid to the point where it was strangling itself, basically.
Oh,
And
wow.
so one day I went to the doctor right as chemotherapy was starting, and I said, "Hey man, I was getting some pain in the chest." And they did a cardiogram. He said, "Your heart's probably going to stop working in about 24 to 48 hours. Like, you need surgery like now." And
Wow.
so 6 a.m. the next day, I had to get heart surgery to basically, they cut a hole in the bottom of my heart and had the fluids basically drain out of my chest for the next 2 to 3 days. And when I woke up from that surgery, the hospital had run out of pain medicine. And so I woke up from heart surgery with no pain medicine. And
Wow.
it was an incredibly painful experience, we'll say. Like, just every breath just felt like 1,000 daggers in my chest.
Sure.
And my wife, she's at my side. She's like, "Hey, they're out of medicine, but they're going right now. They say she should have it in about an hour." I'm like, "Okay," so like, to go through experiences like
How does that
really
happen?
I don't.
How
Yeah,
do you run out
exactly.
of pain medicine?
I don't know.
Wow.
And
Oh my
so
goodness.
to go through experiences like that, you realize that a bad day in real estate where, I don't know, you find some terrible thing in an inspection, or,
Right.
a deal that falls apart, or, you lose a little bit of money. Like,
Right.
those are pretty minor in the grand scheme of things. So I think you can just
Yes.
appreciate even the bad parts of real estate even more once you
Right.
go through things like that.
Absolutely. No, that's awesome. I mean, yeah. I mean, you've lived your toughest lives, right? Well, and I'm thinking, as a
Hopefully.
fighter pilot, there's definitely the possibility of dying any day with that, right? I mean,
For
one
sure. I
wrong
mean, that was
move,
always my
you
wife's
have to become
concern.
a mountain or
She was
something,
pretty
right?
happy when I left. Yeah, she was super happy when I finally retired. She was like, "So you're done?" She's like, it was like a noticeable like stress taken away from her. So she was pretty happy in general.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know I was gonna say she and your 4 kids, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
so, I guess, any real estate advice you could give to someone maybe trying to get into real estate for the first time, or starting out, or maybe trying to scale to, sort of the depths that you are.
Yeah.
Any advice you can offer to them?
I mean, I think the two things are not magical. It's immersion. If you're able to jump in feet first, I was kind of forced into it. Right, I had the opportunity as I left the military. Someone called literally that day. I had top secret clearance with my training and everything. I had plenty of job offers. Someone called literally the day that I got out, and they were like, "Hey man, you can start Monday, 180,000 a year, cushy job. You work 9 to 5, and that's it." And I was tempted, it was very tempting, but I wanted to try it out. So I had a discussion with my wife, like, "I'm going to try this. We're going to jump in feet first, and we're going to go full immersion into real estate. And if it fails, then I'll fall back in one of these jobs."
Right.
And I think full immersion is a big aspect of it to really make a difference and build that momentum. It's very much of a momentum game. The more deals you get, the more people see your success. They start sending you deals, and then that brings more success, more deals. It's just like this kind of big momentum thing that happens.
Yeah. The more deals you do, the more deals that seem to come your way,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. So that momentum's big. And on top of that, it's really just consistency. So between immersion and consistency, there's a lot of people who are willing to, they'll like do a big spurt, like a big social media push for a day or two or a week or a month or 2 months, but then they just drop off. You're like, this is a long game. You need to be consistently involved and immerse yourself to really succeed.
No, that's so true. And I'll second that. Just from my experience, I got into real estate. I was in fitness for years. And all of a sudden I just was like, if I don't do this now, I'm never going to know. And I jumped ship from a cushy job. Like I said, I don't know if it was cushy. It was hard, but I jumped ship, and it was sink or swim. And I was like, okay, failure is not an option. Right. And, I cried 6 months later. I was looking at my husband, like, what did I do? And consistency was key, because I got one deal in 6 months, and I didn't even cover my advertising that I spent that month. Right. But you do need to keep going and keep advertising, because people need to see your ad multiple times before they'll actually respond. Right. And
for sure.
You gotta just stick with it and keep meeting people, keep networking. And then, like you said, the more deals you start to do, you start to get referrals and, that kind of stuff, and business.
Oh yeah. It's like trying to push a boulder, like there's so much energy required to get that momentum actually started, right? You're trying to push this big thing. But once you finally get it moving and you get a little bit, and a lot of people just kind of, oh, the boulder moved, I made a little win, that'll stop. And then that boulder's standing still again. You're like, no, you want to keep pushing it. It just makes it so much easier. There's still work involved. You're still pushing a boulder, but it gets easier.
Yes, it does over time. And you're obviously involved in a lot of different niches, right? You got the, the short-term rentals, the long-term rentals, the, multifamily, the RVs. Any thoughts on which are better or what you prefer, or?
No, I mean, I've read, Gary Keller's book, The One Thing, which I think is a good book, and it says basically focus, right? Focus on one thing, and
Right.
and then the benefits of that. And I truly think there are benefits to it. My intent initially when I jumped into a bunch of different niches was kind of what my mom's advice was when I was a teenager: just date around, date as many girls as you can to figure out what you like, And it was kind of the same thing in real estate. I wanted to date around, see, do I like flipping? Do I like wholesaling? Do I like, short-term rentals? Do I like long-term? Like, what do I like? What do I not like? I found that I don't like wholesaling. It's just not my mentality. Just for whatever reason, it doesn't fit me. Flipping, I don't like it. There's huge margins involved. I'll still do it, but beyond that, I'm not excited about flipping.
Right.
But then short-term rentals, I just really enjoyed kind of you can be engaged with your guests, which is cool if you like engaging with people. My very first guest in my very first short-term rental, they came straight from China. And I wanted to be really, really involved for my first guest. So I went and met him at the house, and Airbnb translates for you in the app.
Right.
And so I guess I knew they were coming from China, but I didn't realize they didn't speak English at all. And so, I come down and I see this group of 8 different Chinese people in full suits, basically in Destin, which is clearly like out of place. And
right.
Like, oh yeah, house over here. And I'm trying to do the pointy talky thing. And it was fun, So I liked that. But at the same time, short-term rentals, you can also disengage and automate as much as you want to, So you don't need to be that involved. But it is work. There are risks. There's variability in short-term rentals. Long-term rentals are nice. They're steady, but you don't really maximize your income. Syndications are nice. There's a lot of stress with syndication, though. You're responsible for other people's money, and it's another level of stress you need to consider. Even if you're doing well, it's just something that's constantly in your mind. You're responsible for other people's money, and there's a bit of a fiduciary responsibility there. And RV parks they can be a pain to manage because not many people want to manage a mobile home park or an RV park. So there is the management aspect there. But once you kind of get those things down, it's good. It works out. And so all that to say, there's pros and cons to every niche. I found myself at this point, I consider myself an opportunistic investor. I've never done self-storage, but if someone were to send me a killer deal with self-storage, I'd probably consider it. You know what I mean? Just because if it's a good opportunity. So that's my mentality when it comes to other people
I like that word because I feel like shiny. I just call myself shiny object, ADD and shiny object syndrome person. Because
I think I lost you. 1 second. Take these off.
No,
1 second. All right, you got me now?
Yep, I get you. Yeah, I like opportunistic investor because I like you. I have long-term rentals. That's kind of how I got started. Then I did the wholesaling, the flipping. I like you did not enjoy wholesaling. Didn't really enjoy flipping. Trying to design a house stresses me out. I'm not good at that. Totally. And then short-term rental, I love it. But and I love the hospitality piece of it. But it's very stressful too. And, we're getting ready to go out of town and I've got to I'm putting lock boxes everywhere in case something goes wrong with the locks. And, so there's just things you have to think about. Right. And then multifamily, same as you. So there's kind of like you. I think I've tried all these different avenues, student housing, all these different things to try to figure out, sort of find my niche of where I want to kind of stay. And there's definitely pros and cons, to both. So, and I think the biggest part is the networking and, getting to know people and kind of learning, what's even out there. Like I said, storage, there's so many different options. You don't even have the time to know, but it is the way to wealth, I think, is like you're saying, more than the flipping and the wholesaling is what can you, hold, right? What can you?
Oh, for sure. And being involved in Pace Morby's group with Sub 2 and these other groups that are out there, whether it be Wealth Gym, even and any of these other really cool opportunities. What I like about them is I feel like I continue to, once I feel like I know what's going on, all of a sudden I learn something new. I was like, I didn't even know that was a thing, pad split where you can, have multiple people stay in one place or, assisted living facilities or, whatever happens to be. There's always some new way to monetize real estate. Where I was like, oh, that's really unique. That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing I'm like, and same thing, because I'm actually going to Flip Hacking Live, which is a
Nice.
seven-figure group, and I've got the Wealth Gym and all these different, and Sub2, and Gator, and all those different aspects.
Yep.
And just when you think you're like, okay, I found my niche, you find this other little shiny thing over here, and but
Yeah.
that's what I love about real estate, though, right? Is there's, you can apply all this knowledge in many different areas, and it does translate, at the end of the day. So. And obviously the real estate market is constantly evolving, and there's a lot of rumors out there of, is it going to go up? Is it going to go down? I'd love to hear your feedback. What are your thoughts of where we're going in this?
I mean, first, I really hate predicting, just because it's almost just wasting time in general, but I'll give you mine anyways. It's a macro market, right? So even right now in the Destin, Panama City Beach market, sales are down pretty significantly overall. They're probably down 50 to 60%, like drastically down. However, there's other markets that I know that are doing incredibly well still hot. I think in general, though, the where we are along the Gulf Coast, Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, insurance rates are crushing us. The deal that you and I are in together, insurance went from $1,200 a door to $3,000 a door for a 200 unit, which increased at almost $500,000 in costs for insurance, which is, it just crushes cash flow. So between insurance, if they continue to be a pain, if interest rates continue to rise, and prices are still rising with it right now, but something's got to give, soon enough. And my expectation is that I don't expect interest rates to fall before prices do. I don't expect insurance to fall before prices do. So I do expect some sort of a slope here shortly, but what is shortly? Who knows? Some people are calling this the silent depression or the quiet depression right now. We're kind of silently getting into this awkward state in the economy, but that doesn't mean I'm not gonna stop buying. I bought 9 condos not too long ago. That I'm flipping 4 of them. That's an entirely different story, but I'm still actively out there pursuing deals. Whether the market's going up or down, when you're a long-term hold investor, ultimately I don't really care about the equity piece as much. I care more about cash flow. So if I can find a cash flowing deal, then I'm happy to buy it.
And that's kind of where we're at. I'm not looking for appreciation. And, again, I think that things could depreciate as long as it's cash flowing, and generally rents don't go down. Now there's still, speculation out there that might happen, but, I have a lot of the same thought, and I got hit with insurance, not only on that deal, the multifamily, but I've got a duplex down in near Fort Myers. And as of July, my, for the 2 units, it used to be like $180 a month for insurance. It's now up to like almost $600 a month. And it literally just overnight in 1 month. And a lot of insurance companies aren't even insuring down there. So
basically in Florida, you have to use Citizens primarily. Basically, I mean, there's some people are using Lloyd's of London or some other ones that may cover you, but for the most part, Citizens, which is Florida's state-run insurance program, and Citizens is changing their policy now to where even if you're not in a flood zone, they're going to start requiring to have flood insurance. So one more additional insurance cost is going to be. So,
no one saw any of that, and I don't think people thought interest rates would be get up to 8, 9, 10% or whatever.
We expected them to rise. I mean, it wasn't a surprise when they rose, right? Everyone knew the market was hot, so we wanted to capture as many sales as we could from the agent side, and we knew times were good. I think a lot of people just were kidding themselves, thinking it was going to be consistently that good all the time. It just wasn't realistic. And so,
and it's funny. I laugh because I refied a bunch of properties when they were really low. And I went back and I was looking at some of my paperwork. And when I was buying back in like 2006, I bought some rental properties and I was buying them at 7%, and I didn't even bat an eye. So in reality, I think we're still just kind of more normalizing in a lot of ways, but we got kind of spoiled, right? So,
in my mind, I think that the shock is going to be if and when double digits becomes the norm. When you start seeing 10% up for whatever reason, that adding that extra digit is going to be the, oh my gosh, like this is a game changer. All the more reason to be creative, though. I'm in the middle of my second sub-2 deal now. We're doing another loan assumption right now. It's just you have to think creatively to capture. There is low interest out there. It's just not low interest via conventional funding. You just got to find a way to capture that low interest.
So you're doing some creative deals. You want to talk for a quick second on your sub-2? So you say you're in the middle of a second one, or you want to talk about your first one? How did you come across this?
Yeah. So the first one, both of these deals, I'm just the agent on the deal. So I'm not personally buying them. The first one, I was representing a seller in Panama City Beach, and the investor came along to buy it, and they underwrote the deal at like 5 or 6% than what the interest rates were at the time. By the time they finally locked in the interest rates, it was like a 9% interest rate. So it basically crushed the deal for the buyer.
Right.
And the buyer fully admitted that was the problem. They were like, hey, it's not working. Interest rates rose too much, and we just can't do it. And so that's when I brought up the opportunity. I was like, why don't you just take over the note? My sellers had a 5.5% interest only payments for the next 5 years. I said, it's a pretty good note that you could take over payments. And they talked to the seller. I calmed all their concerns, the standard concerns they'll have.
Sure.
And we got the deal structured. It worked out really well.
That's awesome.
I have, 3 of my listings right now. One of them that's under contract. I'm representing both the buyer and the seller, and it's a sub-2 deal as well. So it's great for the buyer, great for the seller that he can actually sell the property at the price he's trying to get. But I have 2 other deals, one at $3 million, another one at $3.5 million, that they're willing to sell subject to their mortgage as well. Just because they understand that's a very valuable offering in today's market, knowing that there's risks involved. But it's pretty good.
I think we're going to see more and more. And I love that you being an agent. A lot of agents don't understand sub-2 and think it's like a scam or think it's illegal or so. It's neat to see someone that is also an agent, agent and investor, understanding that it is perfectly legal and it is something that makes sense. And it helps us get sellers more money really at the end of the day than what they would get if not, right?
Totally. I think a lot of agents are just greedy and they think right away, oh, I'm not going to get commission. Like literally that's the first question that almost every agent asks, like,
how am I going to get paid?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, dude, can you just have like the thought process of actually supporting your client first and then worry about the money? But that's just the way a lot of greedy agents think. And so,
no, that's great. Well, you're doing it all, which I love. That's why I was excited to have you on today. So
thanks for having me.
Any last minute, thoughts or advice, or if you want to plug yourself as to how people can maybe get out, get a hold of you if they're interested in buying in Destin or.
I mean, I think the biggest news for me, I will hopefully have my book coming out soon. I kind of got screwed with my publisher, but you can go to roargardner.com and you can sign up for my newsletter there. My book will hopefully be there, and any deals or opportunities that I have, I'll try to send out to my newsletter as well. But we send out a weekly newsletter. And you can find me on all the socials at Roar Gardner. Basically, I'm whatever one you're on, I'm on as Roar Gardner. Okay.
Now, real quick though, you got to explain Roar Gardner.
Sure. Yeah. So that's my call. Roar is my call sign. So like half the people in my life who are all military. That's what people called me in the military, is Roar. It's kind of like Maverick or Goose.
Maverick,
exactly. And so that was my call sign, was Roar. And so for the past 11 years, that's what most people called me. A lot of people didn't even know my actual first name, right? They just called you Roar. That was my first name.
Right.
And so as I left the military, it was. I went by Matt, but then people were like, who's Matt? So it was this kind of like awkward, what do I call myself? And so now I just throw both out there and I respond to either, basically. I'm happy to be called either.
I love it. That's great. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for your service. And I love hearing your story. And, I think there's a lot of people in the military, regardless of how they're getting in or out of the military, when they're coming out, getting into real estate. And I think it's neat to see your successes and how you've been able to transition that very successfully. Because I know that's a lot of people when they're, still young, when they retire from the military or they're getting out for various reasons and trying to figure out that next step. And I think it does translate, fairly well from the people I've seen. So I think that's a great story.
Yeah. For the most part, it's pretty good.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time, and I guess I'll see if I can put a link down for anybody to, find you through Roar Gardner and your book. When do you think it's coming out?
I'm gonna have to most likely self-publish now. So hopefully before the end of the year, next 2 months, 3 months ish, fall.
All right. We'll be looking for it. Awesome. That's awesome. Well, thanks again for your time. I appreciate it.
Ashley, have a great day.
Signing off, everybody. Bye.
See ya.